in the time of the Zoarites. My fire has heated the front tub. By the way, there's two tubs here. One is for my dirty clothes. When I get them washed, I put them over into the rinse water. The wash water is very hot compared to what the rinse water is. So we put our clothes in. I have used lye soap. And by the way, these tubs are original, and this part of the building was added in 1860, several years after house number 1 was built. So we're washing the clothes. When I think they're clean, I take them from the hot wash water and put them back into the rinse water. And I'll use my stick here to move them over. And if the clothes are very soiled, I would use the lye soap and use the scrubber here in order to get the dirt out. So I'm going to stir them around and get the soap out. And also I want a big shout out to Marvin Patton, who is watching us live. And by the way, my name is Mary Lou, and my helper is McKenna. We're going to take them from here, we're going to put them over into the wooden tub, and McKenna's going to run them through the wringer.
Big shout out to Felicity Park, age 12. Thanks for watching today.
Take them over and hang them on the line. Okay, and we'll do that same thing to the other article of clothing we have in here. And sometimes we run them through the wringer twice, that way they dry quicker. And you'll notice over here on our lines, this part of the building is not under roof, so there's usually a nice breeze that comes through here and dries the clothes rather quickly. Let me get that here. Okay, that's our tour of the laundry today. I hope you've learned something. I hope you can come visit us someday in person.
Thank you, Mary Lou and McKenna. We're now going to go to Bruce, back up through the kitchen, and Bruce is going to tell us about the magazine.
Hello, welcome, and at this moment a shout out to Karen Rule, welcome to Zoar. But here I am. I just come in at just for the noontime meal from the fields, all dressed up. So come on in and see what happens. Take my hat off, set her down, and since I'm all dirty from the fields, I have a mirror here, and I have a basin of water so I can clean up, and a place over here to dry my hands, and I'm ready to go. Okay, head back into lunch. However, suppose, for example, I have other needs to take care of. Come on back, and we'll show you what you can do. Here you go. A nice little view of our facilities here. There's one for the men here and one for the ladies over here. Everybody wants a little bit of privacy. And note the materials here. We don't have to worry about the modern shortages of paper and so forth. We have plenty of corn in our fields and husks to deal with those matters. Okay. As you come out here, you notice there's a door off to my left. And it's basically, think of that in the 19th century terms, it's shipping and receiving. Goods come in and out of the society, and this is where they come in and out of, and we store them here. Also notice there's kind of funny shaped boxes there that you can see right in front of you there. Those are beehives, 19th century version, okay? And Zoar has many industries and things that we do here in town, and bees are just another one of them. Well, again, come on with me into another part of our building. This is why we call it the kitchen magazine complex, because there's a lot going on here. Everything from eating to cooking to laundry to the men's and women's facilities, the cleaning. And now this is the magazine part of it. The magazine has an interesting word, actually. It's an old word. It actually comes from the French, and it means a storehouse. So we in the 21st century tend to think of a magazine as something you insert into a firearm, something you would dine another historical site like a fort, like Fort Meigs up in Toledo, where you store all your gunpowder and munitions. Here is simply a storehouse. What we're storing here is household goods, things you eat. So you come here on a certain day of the week. It's called Fastag, gathering day, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you come here with your gathering basket that you can see right that I'm holding here. Remember from prior things, you saw how you toured house number 1. There's also house number 2, a 3, a 4, and so on. And which, if you notice over on the shelf over here, you can see the things have been set out for you. There's a lady whose responsibility it is to set it out. And on the shelf, you can notice the house numbers, house 18, 19, 20, 21, and so forth. And set out on the shelf for the people are things like coffee and tea and sugar and salt. Things that we cannot make ourselves, that we buy from the outside world. And we put them here and we pass them out to you at a prescribed time. Now, so I'll take these, I'll put these into my basket, and I'll take them home. Now, you think to yourself, as a communal society, suppose, for example, I need more sugar this week than last week. I'm making a cake for a birthday or something like that, or some treat for somebody in our house. Well, it's okay to ask for more. That's fine. But the thing is, they have to believe that you're taking what you need and not wasting it. Wasting is wrong morally. Resources, it's wrong in this society because you're wasting the community's resources. So as long as you're not wasting, having more is just fine. Okay, this is a part of the magazine. And additionally, what we have here, we have a nice little scale here, and that would be used to weigh things out. We also have sugar. It comes in the form of a cone. That's how it's processed in the 19th century. And every household is going to have a mortar and pestle. You're going to take that solid sugar and you're going to use the mortar and pestle to basically reduce it to a powder so you can effectively use it in your recipes. Okay. And we have, of course, we have it tied down so it can't escape us. And you use this to pinch off the pieces that you need. Okay. Now, over here in the corner, you see a couple, some round discs. That's butter. Butter is an interesting commodity in Zoar, and what it is, it's very valuable because we can sell it for a large profit up and down the canal. But because we follow the biblical rule in Zoar of not to eat pork, we don't cook with lard, we cook with butter instead. And so, to maximize for the good of the people and the revenue to the community, we kind of watch what we use. Again, enough for everybody to use, but not so much that they waste it. Wasting, again, hurts our community, our profit. Okay. Another thing I'll point out to you is these nice baskets. You see them all over town. You see a nice large one here. And they're made here in Zoar. And typically speaking, the older men of the town, as well as the younger boys, will make them. It gives them something to do and a way to be productive in the community. And it's a way for the older gentlemen to pass on good work habits and skills to the younger people of the town. And that's how we survive. In addition, with put in my basket, being the hard-working people we are, you want to keep busy. We have some yarn up here from our woolen mill, and you can reach up here and you select the color, and you take that home and you use this to make your hats and gloves and mittens and scarves and things for the people of your household, and because you always want to keep busy. Wait, you know, the idle hands are the devil's workshop, and so they're always keeping busy between times. You're knitting and doing things like that for the people to use. Okay. Now I've talked a little bit. Do you guys have any questions? Anything in here you see really you would want to talk about extra? I'll point out one thing over here. I guess it's pretty interesting. Let you guess what it is. Nice long thing here. You know the end of it has holes in it. So what do you think? Long handle to keep you at safe distance, holes in the end. An old Zoar antique. Give you a second to think. Here it is. It's an apple butter stirrer. Zoar actually one time was referred to as a village in the middle of an apple orchard. And the apple is a very valuable tree. Unlike some trees that you maybe only get wood or shade out of, this not only provides shade, it provides food in the form of the apple, drink in the form of cider when you squeeze it, and after that, you can actually make apple butter out of it and use that on your sandwiches and so forth. A multi-valuable tree. Then when the tree reaches old age, it can no longer bear fruit. You cut it up and you make firewood out of it. So you get food, you get drink, you get the butter, apple butter, and you get wood when it's all done. Very valuable tree in town, and the Zoarites were planted a large number of them. That concludes the tour of the magazine. Thank you for your kind attention and enjoy it, and I look forward to seeing you here sometime this summer.
We are actually going to head, thank you Bruce, to the garden house to meet up with Scott, and he is going to tell us about the garden and the garden house.
Hello. Welcome to the Zoar Garden. Let me introduce myself first. And first, I'd like to give a special thanks to any Zoar Separatist descendants that are watching today, particularly Susan Lucas, who is a descendant of Ellis Breitmeyer. So a big thanks to you. I also want to tell you I'm also a Zoar descendant of the Sturm and Kappel family. And just real quickly, the Sturm family worked in the wagon shop, and was the railroad agent for many years and a telegrapher. The Capel side of the family were weavers and dyers, and they ran the woolen mill. So first, let me give you a little history of the garden and explain some of the things that are pretty unique about this garden. First of all, the garden is known as the Garden of Happiness or the Garden of Peace. It's laid out in a geometric design, a pretty unique design that's patterned after the kingdom of God. And you'll find a description as the New Jerusalem in the book of Revelations, the 21st chapter. The other thing that's unique about this garden is there's two different kinds of seeds that are planted and growing here. The first kind are earthly seeds, which you're all familiar with. They're the kind that you plant to grow food. So you plant seeds to grow corn, potatoes, beans, and what have you. Those are a product of what we refer to as the fruits of your labor. The other type of seeds are spiritual seeds. I mentioned earlier to you that the garden was referred to the Garden of Peace or the Garden of Happiness. Those are two spiritual fruits that are mentioned in the Bible, and there are many more. So let me next show you the design of the garden. If you look straight ahead of us, you'll see the large Norway spruce. The spruce tree represents the tree of eternal life or the kingdom of God. And surrounding underneath the tree, inside the boxwood, that's referred to as heaven. The 12 juniper trees that surround the tree of life and are at the head of each of the 12 centrum beds are the 12 apostles and the 12 tribes of Israel. Now you'll also notice there's a very wide path that we're standing on here right now that goes all the way around the garden. And that's referred to as the secular world. And you'll notice in front of us and all around the garden, there's 12 paths that are the straight and narrow paths. And you note that the paths go from the secular world to the tree of eternal life. Now, if you look carefully, you can also see that there's cross paths that go off of the straight and narrow. So if you happen to stray off on one of the cross paths, do not worry, because there's always another way to get back to the tree of eternal life. That incidentally is referred to in the Bible as an act of love, and incidentally that's also another fruit of the Spirit. So that's the basic geometric shape of the garden, and I think if we walk up this way, I'll point out some other things too. Some of the more interesting plants that we have in the garden, for example, if you look over there, that apple tree is a summer rambo. The summer rambo was a very popular apple, but it was only one of about 100 varieties of apple trees that they had in Zoar. Zoar, all the streets were lined with apple trees, and many people referred to Zoar as a big apple orchard, which it was. So the summer rambo tree, it gets real large red apples, and they're very delicious. It's a very old variety, not too many people know about it, but if you read the Separatist history, you'll see a lot of references to summer rambo, so it was a very popular apple.
Scott, what year did they plant the garden, or did they start planting the garden?
It was in 1828.
1828.
Yeah, so that's a good point. In a few more years, it's going to be 200 years old. So it's a long time. Let's take a walk up here, and we'll point out a few other things. I'll just mention a few things as we walk toward the greenhouse. There's 2 beds over here. One is a vegetable bed, the other one is a berry bed. They did put 2 beds of the garden that were in vegetables. They weren't used by the people directly, but they went basically to the hotel. So they were used for special guests and whatnot at the hotel. The rhubarb that you see along the side is actually original rhubarb that was planted by the separatists. So it's very old and it's pretty prolific. Let me mention one other thing up here. If you see these trees that are in blooming right now, they're magnolia trees, and they happen to be the variety that's called Jane. Now, for you kids that are studying science or botany, it's very interesting to know how plants know when to come to life in the spring. Because what happens if they come to life too soon and we get another frost, they'll get bit. So here's a good example right here. These are boxwood. You see the brown foliage there. It was new life that came too soon. We got a frost. They got bit. Now you notice the magnolia tree. Jane's pretty smart. She didn't produce all her buds at one time. So even though some of the buds that came out early got frosted, she has more buds that she's going to put out now. So we're going to still see some more flowers. So it's sort of interesting to know how a plant knows how to come to life in the spring. Do they count the number of warm days or the number of cold days? Or do they look around to see who else is out and then come out? So if you're looking for a good science project, I would highly recommend. It's really interesting how plants think. Okay, let's... I have one plant up here that you're lucky today. I'm going to show you because it blooms early in the spring, and then a lot of tourists, it's gone and you never see it again. But you're lucky today because it's in bloom. So this is a real treat, I got to tell you. The plant I'm going to show you is called the Woad plant, W-O-A-D. And an easy way to remember it is, how do you stop a horse? You say, Woad, right? So you can easily remember that. The yellow flower is the Woad plant. So the Woad plant was used to make the blue dye that Zoar was famous for. If you look at the post on the fence, that's a Zoar blue. And I mentioned earlier too, my family was weavers and dyers. They made the dye from the Woad plant. If any of you are interested in the process for making dye, it's quite interesting. It's very similar to indigo, but it's slightly different, but the same process involved in making the dye. So the Woad plant, it flowers right now. In a few more weeks it'll go to seed. It'll spread its seed in the garden, and then you won't see it again until next year. But you're lucky today because a lot of people never see the Woad plant. Let's see, let's go up toward the greenhouse. Let me just say one thing about the greenhouse. Simon Biter was the gardener for many years. Simon came over and immigrated over in about in the middle 1830s, and he was not a gardener. He didn't know anything about horticulture, as a matter of fact. He was an engineer. He graduated from a 2-year engineering school in Paris before he came over. But when he came over, they needed a gardener, so Simon became the gardener. And I have to tell you, he kept a meticulous diary, and you can tell that he became, very shortly, he became a very accomplished horticulturist. He actually developed several new varieties of pears and apples. So he was pretty unique. He was a very intelligent person. I still rely on Simon's approval working in the garden. Some of you may believe in ghosts, some of you may not. I can tell you a number of interesting stories, but I didn't believe in ghosts, but I'll challenge anybody, if you work around any of these buildings for a number of years, you might change your opinion as to what you believe or not. If I have time, I can tell you one quick story. Okay. If you notice the shapes of the garden, we have 32 different beds. The garden is basically 2 acres big, about 1 acre of grass and 1 acre of plants. And you notice, because of the design, there's all sorts of shapes of beds. There's squares, there's rectangles, there's trapezoids, and there's pentagons. Now the pentagon bed that you can see where the magnolia trees are was a particular challenge. Now I'm an engineer, and I was trying to figure out how to plant in a pentagon bed so that I could cultivate the flowers 2 different ways. I couldn't figure it out. So I sat down right there in the grass and was trying to think about it. And while I was thinking, something tapped my foot. And just when something tapped my foot, it instantly came to my mind how to do it. And I knew where it came from. Simon was watching me, because I asked Simon, I said if Simon was here, he would tell me how to do it. So he did. He told me how to do it, and I thanked him. So I got up and it was perfect. So it turned out to be pretty easy, but I appreciated Simon. And there's other times where I do have to ask Simon, is this okay the way to do something? And I always get some sort of approval, one way or the other. It could be a tap on the foot, and believe me, there's nobody else around, and there is a tap on my foot. And that's all I can say. Let's see, some other things. The greenhouse, this is where Simon lived. The greenhouse is only part of the greenhouse that it's left right now, but the original greenhouse went all the way to Main Street and had glass on both sides. So it was a very productive greenhouse in terms of growing a lot of the plants. Now, because we only have glass on one side and a skylight, we're pretty limited on what we can actually grow in the garden. So we have a grower outside of the area here that grows our plants. And if you saw when we walked there, you might have saw a lot of markings. We're going to be planting the garden actually next Tuesday. And the weather forecast says it's going to be 88 degrees, so we should have a lot of good time. Let's see. Other than apples, I also mentioned they also had 50 different varieties of pears. They had peaches and cherries. And they dried a lot of fruit. If you know where to look, there were like 4 different fruit dryers in the village. And whosever property the little fruit dryer was on, there was cords of wood stacked there. And the fruit dryer was a small building that had a stove inside. So the stove would keep the air warm, and there were trays on the outside of the little building where you would take your fruit, you would put it in the tray, and leave it there until it was dried. So they traded and sold dried fruit on the canal to other towns. So they exported a lot of fruit. They were big growers of all kinds of apples, peaches, cherries, and that was a lot of people. Now, the kids, when they were growing up, they didn't have a lot of candy, but they carried dried fruit in their pockets. Okay? So dried fruit was their candy, so to speak. So it was pretty good, yeah. Let's see, what else can I tell you about the garden? That bed of peonies right there that you can see, they've got bulbs on top of them right now. In another week or 2, they'll be in bloom. Those are original to the Zoar garden. They're old, but they're still very prolific. The roots on them are as big as my wrist right now. So very, very nice flowers. So that's original to the garden here. The other, the hibiscus, which we have a lot of them, they're just coming to life right now. They don't think it's time to grow yet, but they're starting to get, I see some of them coming up about that high now. So they don't take any chances. They wait, they don't say, I can't take any frost. So they delay. Their mechanism is more delayed than other plants. So they're just starting to show right now. The little guys over there, those are moonflowers. They come up every year. You can see they're just starting to come up there too. They'll come up there like a big, this all be filled as a big bush here.
I have a question. What kind of vegetables did they grow here?
They didn't. They grew mostly berries here, strawberries, raspberries, currants. Not too many vegetables per se.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, everybody had vegetable gardens. You know, everybody had chickens and vegetable gardens, and you know, every house was almost like a farm.
Right.
You know, originally.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank
Hope to see you this summer when it's nice and warm. Come and visit us. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. We're going to move up to the bakery to talk to Bev, and she is going to explain how the bakery worked and what the baker's job was every day. This is the first cabin built in Zoar. It's right across the street from the greenhouse and beside the bakery. It's built in 1817. Oh, the bakery is actually in the process of getting a new paint coat, so hopefully by summer it will be back to itself. We'll go in the front door here and we will find Miss Bev.
Wait a minute. Oh, we're already here.
We're here.
Okay, welcome to the bakery. This was the Zoar bakery. There were two bakers here. Now, they not only baked the bread here, but they and their families would have lived in the rooms upstairs. We are going to take you all the way back to the 1820s. So you have to keep in mind that there wasn't a Walmart or a Giant Eagle to go to. So every day somebody from the different homes would come here to get their bread. Also too, keep in mind that this was a very important job. The baker was responsible to make sure everybody in all of the homes got an ample supply of bread. First thing, and we'll just quietly go by and we'll give everybody a chance, we are going to look into this room right here. This was called the bread cellar. You notice the shelves. See the shelves over there? Once the bread had been baked, they're going to put it on the shelves to let it cool. And a lot of you, I've noticed, are looking down here at this doorway. Again, keep in mind, in the 1820s, they did not have electricity here. So that room was their refrigerator. They kept anything that had to be kept cold, milk, cheese, butter, would have been down there in their little refrigerator room. You notice here, those are paddles or peels. This is what they would use to put the bread into the oven and take the bread out of the oven with. And you're going to see when we look at the ovens why the handles. had to be so long. And one of the most important things they would have needed here to bake bread was ovens. We're going to take you back. Just follow me. Here are the ovens. Now, there are 2 of them. And we'll let everybody come up and look into the oven so you can see just how deep. See how far back they go? So let's just imagine we're putting bread in, so you need that long handle in order to get all of the bread in, and then once it's baked, you've got to go back in, scoop it up. Here's a better look at a peel right here with the handle on it. You're scooping the bread up and bringing it out of the oven. We're going to go through the different steps that a baker had to do every day. First thing, he's up at 3:30 in the morning. He's going out, he's getting the wood, he's bringing it in, putting it in both ovens, getting it lit, so now the wood is burning. You're going to put the doors back on the ovens to keep the heat inside. And what happens to wood after it's burned away? Ashes. Becomes ashes, doesn't it? So now we have to get those ashes out. When you walked up past the ovens, did you notice? Do you see this right here? We're just going to lift that up, and that is where you're going to rake the ashes out. Here's the rake right here. Would have been a rake similar to this. You're raking it out. It's going down this hole or down this chute and is in bins below. So now, as you look into the ovens, what's in there? Nothing. All that's there is just the hot bricks. And it's the hot bricks that are going to bake the bread. Right over here, I have a bucket with a broom. They would dip the broom into the water in the bucket, clean the oven floor off as best they could, and then you're almost ready to put the bread in. However, in the very beginning, oven's going to be way, way too hot. If you put the bread in now, you're going to burn it up and nobody would be able to eat it. Let's think about Mom's stove at home. Now on her stove, she's got a dial that you could put the dials on a temperature or punch little buttons in order for the oven to work. Let's say she's going to bake cookies. So 275 she's going to put on there, and the oven heats up to that. Do you see anything like that here? No. So what does the baker do? How does he know when to put the bread in? He sticks his arm into the oven and he counts. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. He can tell by the temperature or the heat on his arm and hand that the oven is ready. You can now go ahead and put the bread in. They had a mixture here, something like cornmeal. And he's going to put that cornmeal down on top of the bricks, and then the bread that's rose is going to set on the cornmeal, and this is how he bakes his bread. On a good day, on a very good day, he's going to get as many as 80 to 100 loaves of bread. Once it's baked, again, he's going to take it out, take it down to the bread cellar, and put it on the shelves to let it cool. Just as an added point, on some days when the weather was really cold or bad, they weren't quite sure when the bread would be done. Take the doors off, and you notice there's a candle here. You're going to stick the candle into the oven, and he gets a good look at what the bread's doing. But remember, he can't keep that in there very long. What's going to happen to the wax? It's going to melt, and it'll get down on top of his bread. So he has to pull it out. Cannot leave it in there for any length length of time. Now we're moving on into the afternoon. Bread's been baked. Sometimes Mom would come up from the different homes to pick up the bread, but mostly it was the children. You see, the school was just right up here on top of the hill. Classes were done, so they're going to come down from the school to pick up their bread. They would bring with them. The bread cloth was a lot bigger than this. This is just an example. A lot of the homes in the village, they're quite large, so 2 or 3 families could live in a home. So the houses were numbered. Do you see here the number on this bread cloth? See, it's 22. Baker knew how many people lived in that house, and he's going to be able to give you enough bread for everybody that's there. What the baker would do was just take the bread, stack it up, fold it up like this, and you're carrying it home. Now, just keep this in mind. When you go to the store, come home with your groceries, you've got plastic bags or sacks that you're just going to throw away and not keep. Here, you're coming back the very next day, again with your bread cloth to get your bread. Made it really convenient and very nice, and we have just a little story. We'll quickly take a minute for the story.
I have 2 questions before your story about this room. What are the squares up there?
That was, you see, and we have right here, you see this little white knob? You would turn that. Remember, there's fire burning in here. And now you're here, so you'll get a look. See, I've got the wood stacked up in there. It's ready to be started. There's smoke. So the smoke, if you don't have a way for the smoke to get up and out, there's a flue. This opens the flue, smoke goes up and out, and the smoke is outside and not inside the bakery.
The next question is, what types of bread did they make here?
Wheat bread, rye bread, white bread, different kinds of bread. There's one bread that I like to mention that they called the Zoar brown bread. Now that bread, they especially liked it because after they had cut it, it seemed to hold its moisture a little better than some of the other breads. And also, stolen was a Christmas bread that they would have baked. They had gingerbread, different types of bread, but it wasn't just bread. As the oven started to cool down, when they started bringing sugar in on the canal boats that they could get down at the magazine, you could now do cookies and pretzels and all of these other good things. You could put them into the oven after the bread had came out, because the oven didn't need to be as hot.
Calvin, age 6, would like to know what would happen if the bread was too big for the bread cloth.
The bread cloth was a lot bigger than this, and it was usually this size. I call this my fun bread. It was usually just a little bit larger than this and weighed about 5 pounds. And keep in mind, the bread cloth was a lot bigger than this, and you could stack it up quite nicely, and it was easy to take it home.
Okay. Thank you.
Now we'll go back to the story. One day, I would like to say it was little boys that did this. I can't imagine little girls doing this. Came down to pick up the bread. Baker got it all ready for them. Off they went. When they got home, all that was left was the crust. They had ate the bread. Do you think they were in trouble? Yes. Great deal of trouble. Great deal of trouble. Now, I just want to briefly take you in. We're going to show you where they stored the flour. See, they had to keep the flour here because this was the mixing room. We're going to come over here. This is an original flour bin. So come on up. We'll let you look in. Now you can see different types of flour. Wheat, the rye. Also, too, they would have had to have kept sugar up here for the cookies and for things like that. But this mixing room, and besides getting up at 3:30 in the morning, they had to get the dough ready. So you can maybe ask Mom about the dough. But they had ingredients here that they used for yeast, because you had to have the yeast in order for the bread to raise. Right here, we'll look at this one. This is a dough tray. See it up here? Bread is going to raise in a dough tray. It raises up. After it is rose, they're going to punch it down. And then, do you see how I got the bread here in this basket? There would have been a liner in that. The bread would raise the second time in a basket. And from there, after the second raising, it's going to go into the oven. And we talked about cookies. Come over here. These are some of the original cookie cutters. And do you see how they're shaped? Not just round or square, but look at this one. And then there's a dog. So the cookies were birds and dogs and all kinds of different things. It wasn't just a boring cookie, it was a fun cookie. And these, as I mentioned, are original. And here's your wheat, here's your rye, and that, they had oats here too, so they could make oatmeal cookies. So all different types of, and they grew everything here that they needed, put them in their own flour mills. They had mills here, would ground them, and then from the flour mill, you're going to bring it up here where you're going to use it for your baked goods.
Jackson, age 8, would like to know how long it took to bake a loaf of bread and how many loaves could you get in the oven at a time?
Very good question, because there seems to be a little discrepancy about this. There are some here who think, let's say we're baking 80 loaves, that they're putting them all into the oven at the same time. You've got all 80 loaves in there. I like to think that, again, if you want to come with me, I like to think that it would have been just too much, that many. So maybe 25 loaves of bread here, 15 maybe in the smaller oven. You're letting them bake. After they've baked, pulling them out, and then getting the next batch of bread in. So you can decide for yourself whether they did it all at once or did it in stages. And depending on the weather, as to how long it would take. On a cold, damp, rainy day, the ovens don't work quite the same as a nice, warm day. So you just had to base how long that bread was in the oven on the weather conditions on that particular day.
Bev, do you still bake in the ovens on occasion?
Yes, we do. We bake in these ovens. So I always like to invite people, just keep aware. We always announce when we're going to have the ovens up and going, and you can come in and actually see us baking in the ovens. And one day, they let us do pizza in the ovens, and it was excellent.
All right. Anything else you'd like to share with us?
Just that open invitation. Come and see us. Come and see how not only just the bakery worked, but learn a little bit about the people who were here and add it to your history lessons.
All right. Well, thank you, Miss Bev. From the bakery, we will go down to the tin shop to meet with Todd, and Todd will tell us all about the tin shop. The original tinsmith did live in this home, and this is another home that would have had two families living in it. Most Zoar homes did have 2 families in it. It is today the Tin Shop Coffee Shop. This is the Tin Shop. It was built in 1825. We will go in and we will meet with our tinsmith.